What's going on, folks? This week we're joined by a former Elite Series pro, currently fishing the Elite Qualifiers. Join us as we have a conversation about the dirty of fishing.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad.
Get on that.
It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the OneCast. I'm not going to give you an episode number because I just forgot which one this is, but we're around 7, somewhere in there. As always, I'm Pete. I'm joined by Trey and Ben to my right here. This week, we're excited to be joined by a former Elite Series pro, guy that's fished 71 events across Bass, Opens, and Elites. Been in the money 35 times, has 6 top 10s, 2 of those on the Elite Series. One on Lake Champlain and one on Santee Cooper. 12 top 20s, 21 top 30s. He's weighed over 1,400 pounds of bass in those events and over 100K in career earnings. And somebody I'm glad to call a friend, Destin Demarion. Destin, how we doing?
Hey, great, Pete. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah,
it
man.
Made me sound a lot cooler than I am.
No. You're as cool as you sound.
And I think you can catch
well, I
bass.
appreciate it.
I think you can catch bass better than all 3 of us combined too.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know about all that. At least you guys get to fish all year round. I'm probably
true.
a little rusty right now.
This is true. So for folks that don't know, Destin, you want to give a little quick bio on yourself, kind of introduce yourself to maybe some new fans and listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Destin Demarion, as Pete said. I'm in my early 30s. I'm 33. Had to think about it for a second. I've got a wife, Megan, little daughter, Eva, who's about to turn 3. It's really been my life for the last few years. My daughter came my first year on the Elite Series, so that was pretty sweet. But obviously that creates a lot more things to think about when you're in the fishing world too. But I started out as a co-angler. That's how I kind of blazed the trail and figured out how to map out doing this, and learned a lot from a lot of really good fishermen. I practiced with Stephen Browning for a season on the Central Opens. When I did that once, I got to fish with Kurt Dove a lot. Joey Naneo was a guy I fished with. Like, I got to fish with a lot of cool guys in practice, and that's not even saying who all I fished with in the tournaments to learn a lot from. So that's kind of what I did. I went to college, did college fishing my last year. I played football up until, that was my senior year. I was able to do spring tournament, and blew out my knee, and fishing it was time to go fishing.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, you're from PA originally, correct?
Yes.
And being from the north myself, and I know Pete's from PA. What was what triggered you into bass fishing? Because I know a lot of times in the north, historically speaking, it hasn't been like the primary means of fishing. We've been multi-species and stuff. But what was it about bass?
I think part of it with bass was just it was so readily available to watch, on TV. I think they do a good job marketing it to people as far as, that being the show. And that was part of it. But a lot of it just from going out and, like you're saying, just being a multi-species angler. My grandfather used to take me. We didn't have a boat. He would just go sit on the bank, and I'd walk because he was older. So he'd just sit in his chair and I'd go walk the banks. But I just really fell in love with bass fishing just because there's so many ways to target them. They're aggressive. They're all over the country. Just the ability to catch them almost anywhere in our country, I think helps too, just with the marketability and just the enjoyment. Anywhere you can go catch a bass. It doesn't have to be on a bass boat. It can be in some farm pond or a little canal in Florida. Just anywhere you can catch bass pretty much in this whole country, which is sweet.
Yeah. Did you ever fish any walleye tournaments or anything? I know that gets pretty big up in our area.
Oh,
so.
geez.
I didn't know if
It's
you
a
ever
huge
dabbled
deal.
into it or not.
No, it's a huge deal. Believe it or not, Pete, you probably have. I don't know if you have or not, but I would assume you have. I've never even trolled, for walleye. Never once in my life.
No, I haven't. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's what so
I've-
I get a lot of guide clients for bass that did the walleye thing up here, and they're like, wow, this is so much different. I want to do this. Because you're fishing. You're actually you're hunting them, and you're doing it instead of just, sitting there, which I like catching walleye, and I catch them. I would just ate some walleye for lunch actually that I caught this summer.
yeah.
But no, I never really did get into it. I did some like just little kids youth derby stuff
Yeah,
for everything, but that's it. No, I've never really got on the walleye thing.
I mean, that's all right. I've never caught a walleye. I've gone twice. So all my family's from Southwest Missouri, Bull Shoals, so they got walleye.
Oh yeah, you got walleye.
They've got a. And at one time, I was probably in college, and I was trying to use my old uncle's pontoon boat, and I was trying to figure out how to bottom bounce in the summertime, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and no one I know there, because we mostly lived away, actually walleye fishes. And then the second time, I was there in the spring, and they were all up on the banks, I guess, spawning, and just like bass, they didn't want to touch anything I had, so I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's not fun trolling for it's really it's meat. It's like just meat fishing at that point when you're trolling.
Yeah, it's not really doing it for the fun. It's like I'm gonna go out there and limit out by 9 o'clock and come home with like 30 pounds of walleye in the freezer, to put in the freezer.
And I'll make some walleye guys mad, but even when you hook them when you're bass fishing, they don't fight.
Right.
You get like one head shake and you're like, yep, that's a walleye, and then you're dragging in a big old log.
That's they say they fight like a wet sock.
Yeah.
I would agree to some extent. However, one time I was drop shotting out by the W's. I'm sure you've heard about that area. Yep. And your dad. I caught a 15-pound walleye on a drop shot with 6-pound test on. That fought.
I bet. Yeah.
Is that a non-keeper up there?
No, we don't have any.
No, it's not slots. No, it's
okay.
over. It's just there's just like it has to be a certain length. 15, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's 15.
Mm-hmm.
Anything over 15 is food.
There's so many. You could never even put a herding in that. I don't care if they're commercial fish. I don't even think they did put a herding on them at all.
No, I mean when you're on walleye on Erie, you can take 6 guys out in a boat and limit in the first 35 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nothing. But Ben, you have I know you had a question.
Yeah. So when Pete said you were coming on, this was one of the first things that crossed my mind. So I'll ask you the question, but then I'll preface it and I'll talk a little bit. But so what draws you to the Bassmaster Elites? And I ask that because we've spent a few episodes talking about the elites, the MLF BPT, the NPFL, and we're fans of fishing. We're obviously not fishing that level, so we watch all of it. We're addicted to it. We love seeing guys, but me personally as a fan, if all 3 tournaments had an event on the same weekend, assuming it's all equal, as in like one doesn't have terrible weather and they're not catching anything type of deal, that happens sometimes, I'm choosing to watch bass, and I've got my personal reasons for that. But with other major organizations out there that have very similar structures and payouts and all, what drives you to Bass, knowing you fished on the elites, and what's driving you to go back to requalify for that organization?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of it in and of yourself, just the fact that you like it more. I think a lot of people it's been around for all of our lives, so it's been the most consistent good show in town. They do great production quality. I mean, the whole thing is just very well run as far as like the shows are excellent. They were the first ones to do, the live coverage, which was pretty sweet as far as like the full event live coverage stuff. They've just done a great job creating a great show, a great system to become that good of a fisherman. I mean, you really have to go through the gauntlet to get there. And I think that's what a lot of the other organizations, and that's no knock on anyone else, haven't had that. You know what I mean? There's something, with the BPT now, it's new, and no one really knew how you qualified for it. But now it's kind of taking shape of like how that comes about. But the elites, that's like every grassroots angler's goal to do, because it's like that, that carrot on the string that's like dangled in front of you, just when you're growing up. That's kind of what they've done a good job in promoting, and they put on a great show. I mean, my first year with COVID, I mean, it was tough, but like we got all this ESPN coverage, the stuff, this is kind of like really valuable slots that for sponsors too. I mean, what kind of sponsor doesn't want 7 hours a day on ESPN? Like, no sport can give you that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, everything you said right there, Destin, is the reason why I prefer Bass. And
I figured.
And it's also the classic, because every kid's dream, right? I mean, it's
Good
even
point. Yep.
still our dream is to go fish a Bassmaster Classic. How, because there's multiple ways to get there. Like, everyone wants to go fish a classic because that's just a phenomenal event, and go across that stage and have a stadium full of people. That, I mean, there's nothing else like out there competing. So.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Ben. I mean, that's another thing. I didn't touch upon that either. I was 15, I think. I don't know. Pete, you probably went to the Classic when it was in Pittsburgh too.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even drive. My mom had to drive me down there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is such a big deal. Like, I already wanted to do it, but I'm like, this just feels more real. Like, it's coming to Pittsburgh. Like, who would have ever thought they could come to Pittsburgh? Like, I wanted to come back to Pittsburgh. Like, I want to fish the Classic in Pittsburgh. Like, that kind of, even though it stinks, everybody says, but it's not that. It's not nearly as bad as they made it out to seem. I mean, but like, that just made it feel more real. Like, that's the big show. They packed Mellon Arena, like, completely full. And then I went to an FLW Cup there a few years later when I was in college. Maybe an eighth of it was full. It was a good show, but it just doesn't have the draw. It never had the draw that Bassmaster does. They put on an excellent production. They have the background in the TV side. A lot of the people that work for JM Productions, which is Jerry McInnes, that put on Bassmaster, they've worked in all types of TV. Like, they're so experienced with putting on good shows. It's just the production value, and not only that, just the level of competition is insane. Like, that is also one of the biggest draws. Like, yeah, like, the NPFL is great. It's a great way now that you can go do it, even and keep a job and like go fish a tour. But like, it just doesn't have the same pool as a Bassmaster Elite Series does, with all the TV deals, with the prestige, with the Classic, as you said, Ben. And to be honest, my main sponsor, Duredge, that's really the only reason I've been able to pursue this as far as I have, is that's the only show they were interested in. That's all they wanted. They weren't interested. I was offered to fish FLW Tour multiple times before I even made the Elite Series. They said, nah, we want the Elite Series. We don't care about that.
Yeah.
That's just truth.
And that's the business mindset behind, we always talk about, chasing a title or, chasing a trophy or whatever the case may be. But sponsors dictate a lot of times what your career path could be, depending on the relationship that you have with them. You talked about going on to, you said you fished collegiately.
I last year, so I started a club, and a buddy of mine and I fished one tournament in the spring after the football season and everything. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So had you not gotten injured in football, do you think things would have been different?
It could have been, yeah. I think that was like, honestly, like the wake up moment. Like, I'm not going to play in the NFL. There's no way. And I want to fish. Like, I knew I was going to do that, but I was waiting till after college. It was like, well, college fishing just came out, basically.
Yeah.
Let's try this. I mean, I don't have a boat. I had never even driven a bass boat at that point. And I was like, let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, and that brings up a good point too. Like, and I wouldn't say that you never could play in the NFL. Like, let's be honest. There's plenty of miracles.
Yes, it would have.
Oh, now he's a miracle.
Yeah, that would have been a miracle.
There's plenty of movies out there, to see people that walk onto the field or they're in their mid-30s and they go to the NFL. But it brings up a good topic, and we're going to get into this later in later episodes with some high school B.A.S.S kids and stuff. But there's so many more stepping stones in the industry now than there ever has been to pave a path into professional fishing, whether you find yourself on the biggest stage of the world or you just do it consistently and you make your living that way. But it's really interesting how we've grown this sport, and you're a part of that. And I think that's really something to be definitely proud of. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
asking the question, would it have been different? I mean, you never would know, but hindsight's always 20/20. Like things typically work out for a reason. So
Yeah, it's all part
yeah.
of God's plan, right?
yep.
It is,
At the end
man.
of the day.
God always, I mean, this is what I think people don't always realize is like, oh man, things are so tough in my life. Why'd this happen? Like a lot of times it's to lead you in a better path. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And unless there's an occasion where it's like, okay, this is happening because you're being stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
You know what I mean? But a lot of times it's okay. You need to change course. You know that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and just back to Pittsburgh because everybody talks about how terrible it was, and I have to defend it a little bit.
Yeah,
That was the year we had that storm, if you remember, and that river changed so much. Because I fished a lot of local derbies like in that area with my dad. I was 17, I think.
Did
when
you
it
that
came.
year?
No, not that year because all spring that was
okay.
like blown out.
Gotcha.
Because of that fall before we had all that rain, it was like the 100,000 year flood or whatever they called it.
Yeah, wasn't that from a hurricane? Was it
Was it Ivan or something like that?
Ivan? I think you're right. Yeah.
What year was it
Irma?
again?
Was it Irma?
Irma, maybe that was it.
Was it Irma?
It was. It would have been
It would have been 10 or
like
11.
2000. No,
It was 2005.
five. Yep, because
I think.
it was the year
Was it KVD's second?
that was his second.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like so, it was normally 15 pounds to win on the river there, or better.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
before that.
12 to 15
and
every
then,
tournament, pretty much.
You know, they came in and it was bad, and the weights were low, but it wasn't because of the fishery. But yeah, I mean that
No.
really sparked my passion more seeing KVD live hoist that trophy. And my dad had surgery like a couple weeks before that, so I had to push him around in a wheelchair. And I'll never forget they gave us like special seating because he was in a wheelchair, and we were like,
There's
right
God's
there.
plan right there, man.
That's
the timing
right.
of
Yeah.
getting the surgery right there.
So like we're right there, and I remember KVD winning, and they blow the air cannons, and the confetti's coming down on us, and he's holding that trophy up, and it's like, man, that is the top of the top right there. Like you do not get any better than that, and it kind of stoked the passion. So, folks, if you haven't had the chance to attend a classic, whether you're into tournament fishing or not, if there's one close, take your family, take your kids, because it can set them on a course that they may not have previously thought possible. And anybody can walk across that stage. I mean, we talked about Brian Kirkle, who won it through the nations, qualified 2 years in a row, and then ended up winning it. The only one to ever do that.
the only one. Yeah.
So it's something that is possible for everybody. So any other questions, or we want to get into the meat and the dirty behind it?
Let's get
You talking about how the sausage is made?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get into
Yeah.
to the behind the scenes of what it's.
Put it in the grinder.
Yeah.
That's right, in the grinder. So cool, yeah. All right, so Destin, we had talked to you. You know, I know you get invited to a lot of these. You've done a lot of interviews and different things. So when I talked to you about coming on, I asked you kind of what did you want to talk about, and we threw some stuff around, and you kind of wanted to talk about the things people don't think about, the nitty gritty or the dirty behind professional fishing, the travel, balancing home life, all of that. So you want to kind of go into that, and then I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions for you. So
Yeah, I think that isn't like really talked about enough. I think we do a good job of building up like the bass fishing, like this is what you want to do. And you have to have an understanding going into that what you're getting into, because a lot of people going, I'm going to have a family, I'm going to make all this money. That's not really how it goes. It's not like, even the NFL will tell you that it's pretty much the same. Like if you're not, a lot of these rookies and stuff, if they're not in the league a certain amount of time, they're not going to get any kind of benefits after the league. They were talking about that with Damar Hamlin. If he would never play another snap, he would never get any money from the NFL because you got to be vested. He's got to be there, I think, at least 3 years or something. And this is only his second year. So it's similar in that sense where, okay, I made the Elite Series, everything is just going to fall in line. And I think that's not true. I'd say a lot of people have went broke. A lot of people have, ruined their family life in pursuing something like that. And I think that's something that we need to really touch upon just so everybody knows what they're getting into. Because I think part of it before was people just didn't know all that stuff, or they were just oblivious because they didn't want to see it. You know what I mean?
Right. So did you feel as you fished through the opens, you had a fair amount of experience prior to qualifying as a co-angler, then as a boater. Did you feel when you made it that those sponsors were just going to come running because you were now an elite pro, or you had been around long enough to know better?
Yes. So the climate too, I've talked about this in other podcasts. A lot of the guys that are 50, 60 years old that have been doing this for a long time, the era that they came in is when you're getting 3 free boats a year, 3 free motors. You're getting $150,000 salary and all your entry fees paid, from Sitgo. I know that was the Sitgo deal when Sitgo was involved. And they had a whole team and stuff. So a lot of the guys were able to build a lot of wealth to carry, you know what I mean? So now that has shifted with the economy, which in 2008, when the economy crashed, a lot of guys were done. It completely just threw them for a loop. If you weren't completely like way ahead of the game and had all the top money, you couldn't do it anymore because the economy just didn't support it. So like now it's tough. It's very saturated in the fishing world as far as getting sponsors and stuff, because there's only so much money to go around and most of the bigger money is going to a few guys. So not all that different than the NFL, not that all that different than professional sports in general. However, NFL base salary, I think, is $250,000 a year. So it is a little bit different.
When you started fishing the opens first, as a boater, and then as you made the elites, because you knew the sponsors weren't coming, how did you go about getting those type of deals to allow you to fish and compete? And then if you think you should have done something different, let the audience know, so that the guys who are hungry for this and who are grinding, maybe they can have an approach to make it a little bit easier on them.
Oh, for sure. So I'd say right now the best model, especially with the young guys that have been successful right now, is to have the money to go in with. You have to have that backing, whether it's your family, whether it's a sponsor. For me, it was a sponsor. Duredge, they supported me and pushed me to continue, doing it. And where I didn't have to, worry about making a check every single tournament I couldn't eat, you know what I mean? But it wasn't that way the whole time. It was that way when I was about to make the Elite Series. And I knew that it was growing to the point where he said, when you make the Elite Series, we're going to take care of you. And he did, So I had that going in. I had that. You have to prepare and have things kind of coming together and ready, because a lot of times when you make the Elite Series, and this is the one thing I've seen with a lot of people, is it's September, October. Most budgets for sponsors happen in that time frame. So I just made the Elite Series. Everyone's already been talking to these sponsors, building their relationships all season. You're basically coming into the game very late into those conversations. So
how much
you
time,
need to start preparing.
How much time do you have in between? In the last tournament, you made the elites until you got to provide your entry fees.
I think for me,
January,
the last
right?
tournament earlier. I think for me, the last tournament was in early September. I think our first payment was due in November.
About a month.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's what I mean. You have to be prepared. And like, I was fortunate being a co-angler, not only just for the fishing aspect. I paid attention to how a lot of professionals like a Stephen Browning, and I asked them a bunch of questions like, how does this work? And a lot of the guys are very upfront, because a lot of them are jaded about certain things too. Like, I can't believe this is still the way it is. Like that kind of stuff. But you learn from that. And like, okay, this guy who's the best in the world, he was about to quit fishing, but then some sponsor came through and that happened. Like you would never even know about him anymore, right now. But those kind of stories, and like what they did right, what they did wrong. But most of it is preparing. Like you have to be prepared now, because back in the 90s or whatever, when you made the Elite Series, well, it wasn't even the Elites. I think it was the 150s at that point.
The 150s.
Yep.
They were going to throw money at you. If you Mercury, I want an engine. Okay, here's 2. Phoenix, I want a boat. Here's 3. you
Yeah,
know what I mean? That's not how almost any deal works now. Most people, I'd say, like Pete, you're saying 90% have a job. I'd say 90% of the guys, even in the Elite Series, are paying for their boat. Like, no, we're not paying a lot, but we're still paying for the boat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've talked about this, I think, on another podcast, that the guys that are getting all these free boats and free reels and free rods and free line, and you're talking about, if we call the elite, anybody fishing the Elite Series, the 1%, it's like the 1% of that has those deals. You look at a guy like Kevin Van Dam, who's made how much money for his sponsors over all those years. They might throw him a boat. But not everybody, and everybody, you see them start arguing online. Oh, they have this because they get it for free. I know for a fact that you buy your electronics. Like, yeah, you get some help with it, but
I mean, some of it, yeah, I would say rods, reels for most of the years. It's just been, once I made the Elites, those doors open where you get all that.
yeah.
Yeah.
You get a lot of your equipment. I'd say the one thing, you do get all of your equipment, but if you're coming on the Elites and you're like me, you're just like you come from a middle-class family, like $10,000 payments isn't like an easy thing. You know what I mean?
No.
I mean, I told you about the Endure Edge thing. So like, I was very prepared for that. So I wasn't going to be extra worried about that and fishing. You can't be worried about both.
Right.
You have to be in a secure enough place where you can focus on your job. There's not too many jobs where you're like, okay, if I don't fish well enough today, I'm probably gonna go broke. Like, I know people that have done that. They're like, I've racked up credit card debt, and it just completely ruin your financial future, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I know guys now that it's like, if I don't get a check in the next tournament, I'm not going to have a truck to tow my boat to the one after that.
Filing some bankruptcy.
It's and that's the things people don't think about. They also don't take into account, and I'm sure, Destin, if you don't mind talking about it,
Sure.
just the travel expenses with lodging, fuel, meals,
Right.
all of that. How does that look when you get to that level?
Yeah. So, I mean, on the Elite Series, entry fees probably, I mean, when I started, probably like 45,000. And I think now they're about 50.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just entry fees. So that's what you're paying. You pay it in installments, or you can pay up front. I'd say most people do it in installments.
Yeah, I mean that's more than the household medium income. I would say.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's largely sponsor driven. You have to have the sponsors, or it's not lucrative. You have to be smart about it in a business sense. Like, yeah, I love to fish. This is what I want to do. Think about it, but make sure that you're doing it like financially wisely.
Mhm.
Okay. It's not worth destroying your family's future over doing that.
So did
And
sponsors
that would be
provide-
the point where I would leave. At the
Right.
point where it's going to destroy my family, I'll be like, I'm done. That's it. Because why?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Do they provide money for lodging and fuel for your travel expenses, or is that largely dependent on how your
Sponsors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the sponsor deals are that way. But like I was saying about the fishing industry, here's a little tidbit that I've learned from other guys and applied myself. Fishing industry is so saturated, there's not a lot of money. And this is one of the gripes. I don't necessarily completely agree with it, but the JT Kenny has said it, a lot of guys. Well, it's because of all these 20% discount guys, and it's all this, which it is to some extent. However, like, the money is just only given to one. So a decent sized sponsor is going to support like one guy a good amount, and then everything else is just scraps. You know what I mean? So that you got to understand that you're not going to get a ton of money from fishing industry in general. You can get, product a lot of times, good discounts, etc., like on your boat or motors. But if you want to be sustainable and have a career, you have to have other sponsors from outside of fishing that want to be involved in fishing. That there's a crossover with outdoor sport in that industry. Their customers, are very much, crossing over as far as the audiences. So you want to market to those kind of companies. I mean, a lot of guys have done well, just local companies, people that they know. Joe Bob's auto shop will give them $5,000 to have a tax write-off. Like that too, you could piece together that way or whatever you want to do. But the fishing industry, it's hard to bleed. What is the saying about bleeding money out of a rock or
Yeah.
something?
Yep.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, something
But
like that. I know what you're trying to say.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't bleed money out of a rock or something.
I mean, those big sponsors within the industry, it's hard for them to find a significant return on investment when their name is so large and they've been in the game for so long,
Yeah,
right?
good point.
So the Strike Kings and insert name here, like they don't need to. I mean, they don't have a
Right.
need, right? So if you
Right.
can't find a mutually beneficial like negotiation, figure out what a win-win is, then they're going to walk away from the table, right?
You know, Troy, that's
Correct.
interesting because
Great point.
Zaldane, that was when he switched over. You know, he left B.A.S. and he had a big long Facebook post about it. And the reason was that it was essentially B.A.S. wasn't giving back to the tournament anglers, right? You know, who are using their products and all that stuff, weren't providing sponsors. So, you know, those companies have to figure that balance out and not, right? They can do their own thing. But the point is there's not money, like it's not infinite money that goes around from sponsors within the fishing industry. And that's why you have to, like, as you mentioned, go out and look for those non-endemic, sources of sponsorship. And
that's why you don't see big fishing industry companies as a title sponsor on more than one boat. Like Destin was saying, when it kind of bleeds down. If you look at somebody that comes to mind is like Seth Fighter and his relationship with Daiwa. Like Daiwa's all over him. It's on his boat. He's one of his title sponsors. He's getting a big chunk of that, and then it kind of trickles down to the rest of the Daiwa pros. And you see that with the other big companies. Even I know you were kind of talking about his name, went to Guggen Squad. They have several guys, but the level of representation that those anglers have on their jerseys and boats versus the next guy down the line, you can kind of see that trickle down effect. So that's really interesting that you bring that up, Des. And obviously you built a great relationship with Dura Edge, early on, when you were traveling. So I kind of want you to talk about like a typical travel for an elite tournament, which now is going to carry over to the qualifiers with the official practice days, right? So what did that look like as a husband, a new father, traveling to fish a tournament that, from Pittsburgh or from Pennsylvania where you're at, outside of Pittsburgh North, nowhere was really close unless you were in New York.
No.
So,
Right.
when you traveled, let's say St. John's River, that's a long way down the East Coast. What is a travel, what does that look like for a tournament when you're traveling like that?
Yeah, so St. John's, because I lived in Pittsburgh at the time, and now I'm in Erie, but about 15, 16 hours to St. John's.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived down there for a while, so like I don't mind that, and I stay with my buddy. I worked at the lodge, so I can stay at the lodge, and it's comfortable. I like it down there. But even Champlain, Champlain is 9 hours from me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people think, that I was close. I've never lived that close to Champlain in my life. Even those northern tournaments are, because you're for Greensboro, it's about the same, like 9 or 10 hours up to Champlain. So it's far. Yeah, you want to live in like Tennessee or the Carolinas or Alabama. Like that's the central location you want to be. I don't know why I'm in Pennsylvania.
Ice fishing.
I'm not an ice fisherman.
No, I can tell you,
Walleye.
Destin is not an ice fisherman.
No. I fell through the ice before. I used to do it, and that didn't deter me. But like, it's just not fun to me. It's boring. It's kind of like the sitting out there and trolling thing. It's not for me. But yeah, when my first year, the kids come in 2 months after we start the season. I'm on the road 3 weeks a month until probably like July, I would say. And then it's slow. Then we had that COVID, so it just jammed into the fall. So we had all those September, October, November tournaments. So I was gone most of the year, so I was not really home much. And that's going to be what the EQ is going to be like. I had to really think about it because it's 9 tournaments. It's the same as the elites. And I understand why they're doing that. It's a good thing because it's going to prepare you more for that travel.
Right.
Like it's going to weed some people out as far as the travel, the thing going to pre-fishing, because now you have that only 5 days of, official practice thing, which in the elites we only had 3. which was that's a huge change from the opens where you can practice for a week
Yep.
or whatever you want. You come on the elites, you get 3 days to practice. It's hard to change your strategy a lot. It takes you a little bit of time to warp your strategy from what you use to make it in the opens to that, which this should help with that a little bit, because the pre-fishing is so important in the elites. You have to go to these fisheries. They're 100+ miles of rivers where you've never even been.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go there and feel it out, because a lot of times there's only certain areas that are any good, within those places. And you can't get any information. You can't call your buddy that fishes all the Wednesday nighters there. You can't do any of that.
Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, it changed. It doesn't change, I don't think, in your time on the elites really either, because I actually had this conversation with John Cruz. I don't know, a month or so ago. I ran, he was at an event and we
Probably
were
right?
Yeah. We were chatting. It was actually an event for Cash and for their customer appreciation, but
Yeah.
I was chatting with him and I was like, man, when you go, do you feel like you have an advantage because you've been doing this for X amount of years and you've been to these lakes? And no hesitation, he pretty much said no, because it changes, weather conditions, fronts.
It does.
Time of year they're going, even a month one way or the other going to a body of water changes. So what you gain is you have a little bit of knowledge of the lake, but not necessarily that those waypoints from 2 years ago are any good this year, because it could be a completely different situation that you were fishing. So those 3 days, whether you've been on the tour, it's your first event like Destin's talking, or your 300th event, it's not the same as the last time you were there. Yeah, you have a little bit of historical data you can fall back on, but generally speaking, it's different. And that's the one thing. How did you put it, Ben? Not fish the moment, but you had a good
Fishational.
Fishational.
That's good.
Yeah.
And it comes down to that. So I can't imagine the change from when you could go a month in advance and practice to 5 days or 3 days.
I mean, I think it's great. When I got out of the Army 2 years ago, my get out of the Army gift was to go fish the Harris Chain for 2 weeks. And I was down there right before the B.A.S.S opened. And, as an average weekend angler, I figured out where some good fish were, but it took me about 4 or 5 days, because I went to Florida. I'm going to go punch lily pads. I'm going to fish shallow. I'm going to do all this. And I spent, like 3 days running around to all the different lakes, trying that, and then trying to look in canals for spawning fish. Ended up finding all the fish offshore in the eelgrass on Lake Griffin. And actually some locals helped, informing on some of that, because, never been on the lake before. I don't know anything except for watching the television coverage. And it's a different, if you only had 3 days to figure out, I mean, that's a completely different mindset than setting up an entire month before the event, as some of these guys did. So
for me, it's crazy to look at a guy like you, Destin, or the rest of the field, like a sport that you have to pay to play, where the playbook is constantly changing. It's not a 100-yard field. It's not a court. There's only so many plays you can make in the NFL. I could steal your playbook if I was that good and figure out what's. But you're out there alone and unafraid on a dynamic field that changes every second, and you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
I did.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
It sounds absolutely crazy.
Put it that way, it's like, well, I don't want to do
Yeah,
that.
So I mean, you got to be realistic, right? And so you talked about the sponsorships and having a plan. We talked about a little bit of the travel. I don't think a lot of people talk about having. So you were married before you started in the opens, right?
Not the whole time.
Not the whole time.
I got married right before I made the elites. So like a couple months before I started my season that I made the elites on.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So this is a personal question. You don't have to answer it, but
sure.
You got the sponsorship relationships and expectation management.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that closed door conversation with your spouse or significant other look like? That level of expectation management. This is what could happen. This is what could happen, so on and so forth. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and what that was like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that's probably one of the least talked about things that we hear about in fishing is like your family, your wife, and how that all works. And I mean, fortunate for me, I've been doing this. My wife and I were dating in college, and she knew that I wanted to do this even before I started fishing any tournaments or anything. And she knew I was serious about it, and just by the actions that I took to do it, and she got a taste of like the travel and how much you got to travel and what all entails. And so when we made the elites, we talked about it. We said, "Is this something you're gonna want to do?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, I'm going to be gone this much. We've got a kid coming. Like these are the hard conversations we had to have. And even though you had a conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to work out the way that you both talk about. You know what I mean? Because a lot of things happen. At the end of my rookie year, my wife had emergency surgery. I had to fly. I was going to Fork. I had to drop my boat off real quick at my friend's house and fly home. And then we had those last few tournaments, and I'd go back and we had to figure out life after all that and how to orchestrate that with the kid and all that. I mean, a lot of things happen that you just don't predict. You can't predict, and that makes things a lot more difficult. And no matter how much you're on the same page about understanding and expectations, as you've said, you're never going to have everything planned for. And that's one of the hardest things is managing to balance your family time, your expectations as a husband, as a wife, etc. And I don't have a clear cut like answer because I don't believe I'm the best person at doing that. I think it's something that I've struggled with, just dealing with a lot of the problems that we run across as a family and just navigating, balancing the two of them.
Yeah. And that is, I don't think anybody has the answer. I don't think there is such a thing. I think that's, you write that chapter every step of the way. You close it out and you write a new one every tournament, every situation.
Right.
So it's interesting. And I think we need to take a quick break real quick and
let's
reset.
stop there because I got a couple more follow-up questions.
Yeah, and we got some, are you good with that, Destin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. We'll take a quick break.
Yeah, so, you talked about the adversity that you faced your first year. You had a child. Your wife had emergency surgery. You had to fly home, in your first 2 years on the elites. How did you keep your head in the game? Or was that was that not something that you could really prepare for? How did you stay positive mentally?
I definitely stayed positive, but it's not something you can prepare for. And like I said, I'm not the best person to say that I'm the best husband or I'm the best at anything, because the thing that I did, and it probably wasn't the right thing, is I said, I got to compartmentalize this, because I turned around, flew right back, and had to fish 4 tournaments in a row. I was like, I have to compartmentalize this as much as I can just to get through this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't allow myself to like deal with it at that point, other than do my duty, go back, make sure she's okay, take care of her, make sure everyone else is taking care of her, and then I am in a good place where I can leave. You know what I mean? That's what I had to do.
I know I reached out to you last year to talk a little bit about, mentality and the mental side of fishing. I haven't fished any big stuff in years, but, I wanted to get back into tournament fishing a little bit, and I almost forgot about how much mental fortitude goes into fishing, I guess is a way to put it, because I had a tournament where I was on a bite and some good fish, and I lost like 7 before 7:30, like good fish just come unpegged.
We talked about that one. I remember that.
And I hit Destin up because I deleted the GoPro footage because it was bad, because I came
too hard to look at.
I'm throwing packs of hooks into the lake, like it was bad. And this is like, it's not anything serious, but I came unglued. So afterwards, like Destin said, we talked about, I reached out to him like, man, like, what do you do? So if you had any advice for folks coming up, and the higher stakes, the more that mental push comes. And I know, Swindle always talks about positive mental attitude, and that's great to say, but do you have any advice for anybody that might be listening on how you can actually help maintain that? Not necessarily the behind the scenes home life stuff, but during a day on the water, because I don't think we hear that a lot on how you reset after you lose a big fish or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it is like losing a big fish or just not letting your thoughts get negative. Like, what am I going to do when I get home? Like, how am I going to deal with this issue that we have? Okay, we have to fix a septic tank or we got to do this. Like, there's $10,000-$20,000 we got to come up with and I got to deal with when I get home. Oh, your wife's calling you. We got to fix this. Like, it's hard to deal with that stuff when you're trying to literally laser focus on something. And I mean, like I said, I don't think I'm the best at doing it, but some of the things that I've done, I mean, with that situation, I had to compartmentalize as much as I could and basically soldier on, which is not really the best thing in an emotional sense, but sometimes you have to for a short term. You have to do that. That's the only way you're going to get through it. But you have to deal with the problems. And in fishing, when I just try to not let them, in the fishing sense, if you lose a fish, you just try not to let them become anything. Losing a fish, a lot of my friends, and I used to do it too when I was starting out, and I was like, this just doesn't help. Oh man, I lost this fish. I would have won this tournament, blah, 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 blah. You just can't go there. You know that every other guy in that field has a similar story that they lost some fish that could have, should have, would have done something. And you just cannot take yourself to that negative mental place that's going to further inhibit you from doing what you need to do and just put you in a negative mindset. You don't want to be a victim. And I think, I'm not going to preach, but in the country, I think we have a problem with just like, stop being a victim. Like the only way that you can, soldier on and continue to do good things and positively move forward is to not allow yourself to be the victim of a circumstance, because everyone is a victim in some sense of their life. And in a lot of sense, some people have more stuff, some people have less, but the truth of the matter is we all have things that are not fair, but it's how we recognize them in our mind and how we get through that as far as like framing it. So we're just framing it as this is just, it happened. I can't change it. I can't control it. So I'm just going to let that go and keep moving forward. That's all you can do. And you might come in and zero in the tournament and you had 5 fish on for 25 pounds. Believe me, I've had those situations where I'm like, how did I have a 0?
Yep.
I had 5 giant fish on today. And that's just how it goes. Like everyone has those times where it just doesn't seem to fall together, but it can snowball worse if you just go into that victim mentality. Really, I feel like that's one of the biggest things that you can avoid.
You don't allow those instances to consume you, right?
You try not to,
right? But some of the best advice and some of the best training that I ever have is trying to get over what can I control, what do I have to influence to make a better decision, and then what do I have to accept, right? We throw it out there, CIA. What can I control? What can I influence? And what do I have to accept? And it's a constant circle of emotion.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? Like somebody backed into my trailer and it's still on my mind. I can't control the fact that they backed into it. What can I influence is either maintaining a positive attitude, saying I'm going to fix it, or circle the drain and be negative. Or I don't have to fix it. I can just accept that it's dented in. That goes with everything that we do in life. And you have definitely dealt with your deal of different situations, and not allowing it to consume you is probably why you're at where you're at today, like being successful and not allowing that to run roadblock against your dreams and aspirations.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and talking to Destin helped me a lot. I had almost the exact same situation happen again, and it was all my fault. Even the first time it was, I'm trying to blame the hooks and everything, but the second time I had that issue start, I thought about our conversation. I sat down on the front deck of my boat, grabbed a bottle of water, sat there and drank it, and just pushed that all out of my head, and I was back to run. I think I ended up, I know I cashed a check in that one, second or third.
Heck yeah.
But, that was what worked for me. But I was able to circle back to that conversation we had, and it's like, man, you just have to let it go. And I think that a lot of people need to hear that. And I think that's one of the things we talk about all the time. What separates at the top at the top levels of fishing, guys like Destin, guys, the elite guys, people that have been there will be there again. I have no doubt. They have, I don't want to say they've mastered it, but they have a much better hold on the mental side of fishing.
So after all those things happen to you, as every angler, every person's different, what is your outlet to maybe revisiting that or letting that go? Because you said you compartmentalize it, right? You compartmentalize it, but where do you in your life, how do you make yourself vulnerable to like getting rid of all that so that you can continue to compartmentalize more stuff that will happen in the future?
Oh, 100%. And when it's raining, it's hard to do that. And you know what I mean? Because you are having to compartmentalize so many things that it becomes overwhelming if you do that. With fishing, a lot of times it's just essentially my buddy would call it a debrief.
Mm-hmm.
So after the tournament, you and your buddy, after the tournament you're staying with, and you just talk about everything that happened and blah, blah, blah. But then you turn it into positive. We got this tournament coming up. We're going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to that, blah, blah, blah. You got to get it out. You definitely have to get it out, but not in a complaining way. You know what I mean? Not complaining like, hey, everybody, I should have won this tournament. Like, I mean, a younger me has made many other blunders, but this older me, I hope, has learned that doesn't help. That definitely doesn't help. So the debrief is a big one. That's something that you can get it out, like you said, and you can deal with it. And talking about something, getting it out there helps it be less powerful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you brought up a great point. And for all of those, the viewers, the listeners, and people watching on different social media platforms, a sport where you're in it by yourself still needs, certain people still need other people in the sport to help them cope with what's going on, right? And that's why you see a lot of people travel together, room together, and stuff like that. There are people that can do it by themselves. They don't need anybody, right? And that maybe that's the way they process information. I know myself, I would definitely need a group of compadres to sit down just like we're doing right now and talk about those things, because the hardest thing to do is make yourself vulnerable to let it all out, right? And then because you learn more from poor decisions, I think, than you do from anything.
100%.
Right? So, no, I appreciate you talking
about
that.
You always learn the most from that. I mean, any situation where I'm like, so we were at Chesapeake Bay, and you know how tough that fishing was. Mm-hmm. But we had a day where it just like torrentially downpoured, and we were just waiting it out till it slowed down, me and a few guys that were staying with. So we were watching some old tournaments. So my buddy Cole, he had a really good tournament at Lake Norman, an open. So we were watching that. And he's like, why don't we watch Champlain, the one that you did really good at the last year? And I was like, oh, okay. I'd never even watched it yet. I hadn't even seen the tournament, and I went back and watched it. I was like, wow, that was like cool. Like that was good. That was good too. Just seeing like what you did do right. And then I think about, but most of the time during watching that tournament, I was like, man, I should have made this move. I should have done that.
Had those cringe moments, like, oh,
yeah,
look
but
at
not
that.
like in a powerful way. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't do it. No, it was like, in this situation, I might have done this. I should have done that. Like that kind of thing. But like not where it bothers you.
Yeah, game footage.
Yeah, and if you think about it, all the lessons we've learned in life have been most of them have been from failure. Yeah, we tried something that didn't work, so we did it a different way until it did. And I think that's a really good point to be able to. I probably need to do better on that.
You shouldn't turn your GoPro off next time.
No.
Yeah.
If it's ever one of those,
go watch every hook set and break off.
Yeah, between my mom and the good Lord, they don't need to see that. So.
The good Lord already.
Well, he already saw it, but he doesn't want to.
Yeah, he knows what you said.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So, what's your question related to? Because I want to ask a couple fun ones.
Oh, these were fun ones at the end.
All right. Well, we're kind of wrapping down here.
I got all the
anything
serious.
You really?
You just put it all on me. I just asked all serious.
So I just wanted you to trauma dump. That's all.
I can go. I got two quick ones for you. The first is, what lake are you most looking forward to this upcoming season? And I'll get the second one after you.
I'm going to say Toledo Bend.
Okay.
Just because I've never been. And I hear it's starting to come back a little bit.
That's in April, right?
Yeah, that should be a good time there. Mm-hmm. The timing should be great. but it was kind of on a down cycle, and I think it's starting to come back in the last year or two. So I want to go. I like going places that have big fish, like a Lake Fork. That was always the one I was circling on the list.
Mm.
Santee, those kind of places.
I'm sure you always
probably
circled the
Toledo.
Sabine River too, right?
Dude, I didn't mind it. It was tough. Like you knew what you were getting into, but no, it's not fun. It's not
I went
fun.
I went on a rant a couple episodes ago about why do they keep
Oh,
going to
I
the
listened
city?
to it. Yeah, I listened to
I'm
it.
like,
Everybody has
Comes
a
up
shot
again, don't
there,
worry.
though. Everybody has a shot
When,
at the
when our
Sabine
episode
River.
drops Thursday and we go through the Elite Series, it comes up again. We get to
yeah.
relive Ben's.
Yeah, you can gripe about Sabine.
Every time, and I know I'm not the only one who've said that because every time. But
I think as a fan, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
the
Yes,
second,
it's not fun to watch.
yeah, the second one is so you're a professional angler. When is the last time you've been on the water?
Right before New Year's.
Okay, not as
20
long
years.
as I thought, but still, that's a couple weeks. That's a few weeks. So
Yeah, I put my boat away right before we got that second big blast where it was like negative degrees, and and my buddy invited me up to Buffalo, and I went out with him, and we caught like 30, I think, 30 bass.
Man, you can get some giants up out of Buffalo this time of year.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Last year we went out New Year's Eve and caught 180
180.
I remember that
Wow.
video.
180
That's,
what?
smallies,
What?
Yeah.
and,
ridiculous.
our best five was 29.5 that day.
That Eastern Basin, Buffalo, up in that area in the winters,
I-
just holds those big smallmouth, and they've been feeding, getting
30
ready.
pounds of
It's-
small.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
30 pounds.
I
of
caught the
smallmouth.
same weight in a tournament there a few years ago in a Douglas rods, big money. We caught 29.5.
Wow.
What lake are you least looking forward to on your schedule this year?
The Harris
Ooh.
chain.
He said lake too. So
it could be river.
Harris Chain
Like
isn't
river.
bad. Harris Chain isn't bad, and I've got to spend some time there because I lived like near Palatka for a while when I was at St. John's. But probably Watts Bar.
Tennessee.
That's a fair
I'm
one.
thinking what?
I've heard a
Just
lot of people.
not- Just the timing.
Yeah.
The timing. If you look back at tournaments at Watts Bar the time of year, like they used to have 2-day super tournaments like BFLs. The guy that won was the only one that caught a limit both days. You know what I mean? Everyone else didn't even have a limit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I know you've had a few travel companions or partners, whatever you want to call them, over
yeah.
the years. Who's been your favorite one, and who do you think you've learned the most from?
I'd say my favorite one is probably, I don't want to like shortchange any of my other buddies,
No, you're not
But-
shortchanging
but-
anybody.
but Craig Chambers, I've been traveling with him for a few years, and he lives down in Charlotte, but his family's from Grove City. Okay, so I drew him as a co-angler, and he's like, "Where are you from?" I was like, "Ah, just some little town in Pennsylvania." And he's like, "Oh, try me. I got family there." I was like, "You wouldn't even know it." It's like Grove City. He's like, "Yeah, that's where they live." So I was like, "Whoa, that's pretty crazy."
Yeah.
So we hit it off. We had a fun day, and we stayed in touch. And then we started traveling in the opens. And
Awesome.
the year that I made the elites, he was in there, and the last day he lost some fish, and he ended up like 9th or something, just like one spot out or whatever.
That's tough.
And he's wild. He's the opposite of me, but it's a good balance. It's a really good balance. He's
Yeah.
like, dude, they like balance each other out,
I got a question now that you're fishing all nine to get back into the elites. In your experience between the opens and the elites, which one's more fun?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the opens, but with that caveat, like you can spend more time there, so you're hanging out with your friends. It's a little more relaxed because you have that more time, before the tournament usually. So that's what. But with the elites, like the second year, I didn't even travel with anybody, so it wasn't the same fun. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's way more fun to travel with somebody. I think the elites would be way more fun to travel with, like, Craig. Like if we both make it together, like that's ultimately what we want to do because, we get each other, we know how each other works, and we trust each other. You know what I mean?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll say the opens just with that caveat.
That makes sense. Yeah, you get to spend time with a friend and Yeah, a little bit more camaraderie and
Is your
Yeah,
fam-
you can hang out with a lot of guys.
Yeah.
You know, like you travel with like 5, 6 guys and all crash at a house for an open, make
Yeah.
it cheaper, and you get to hang out every night and have dinner. You know, that kind of stuff.
I know my wife does it to me when I'm out. Even when I'm gone for work, she does it. She's like, "Oh, you're just out having fun." Does your
Right.
does your wife do that? Is she like, "Oh, you're just partying with the boys"?
Yes. Even though I don't think I've had a drink for like 10 years. I don't
Well,
even drink. I'm not even like fun in that sense. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Partying is
party.
relative, however that looks. What does a Destin Demarion? This is my last question. I'll turn it back over to Pete. But what does a Destin Demarion do outside of the fishing world besides spending time with being a father and a husband? What recreational things do you like to get yourself into?
Funny enough, it's probably fishing. You know, to me, it's like a completely different type. Like you've got your tournament fishing, which
Yeah.
is like totally laser focused, very intense. Whereas like just going out and having fun fishing is kind of how I like recharge. Like honestly, I just like to go out and launch right here at my house and just go graph around, and I could not even make a cast and be completely content.
Yep.
But I definitely want to catch one. But
Sure.
I would be
Gotcha.
content if I did. You know.
yeah. What do you got, Ben?
I asked my two.
That was all you had?
That's all. Yeah.
That's two?
That's what I.
What's your
Putting them on the
PB?
spot.
Those are
What's
my-
your biggest bass? Destin,
9.5, I think.
where'd
yes.
you catch it?
Largemouth. It
Where'd-
was in St. John's.
St. John's. What about Smalley?
7.2.
Wow.
Erie?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
In
awesome.
that tournament, I caught one that was almost 7, like just a hair under 2. And that Douglas, we had almost 30 in. Caught one on almost. That was like the last cast, too.
Did you already have 5? Was that a cull fish, or did you need one more? And then
Yeah,
catch a
we'd
jump?
caught like 40 or 50 that
Yeah.
day.
That's one thing. A lot of like when I talk to guys that are from North Carolina, they don't understand how those smallmouth can be. You tell them you go out and
Oh,
catch
yeah.
180, and they're like, "There's no way," and I'm like, "No, dude. Like,
Yeah, you get
if you get them right, like, I think our best day on Erie with my dad and I, and we were tired, so we quit fishing, or we'd have caught more. Was right at 100.
That's
That was
unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
the average was 3 pounds, and it was
I
pre-spawn.
remember you and your dad telling me about
Yeah,
that.
and they had just
when we were having
stacked
dinner.
up on a deep edge leading up to a spawning flat, and it was every cast.
That's a bucket
Yep.
list situation for me. In 2 years, you can rest assured I'll be up there to pick your
That'd be
brain on
awesome.
that. So
Well, Destin, he can take you out with his guide service. So if you
Oh,
don't have
yeah.
any
Oh,
questions,
yeah.
Destin, why don't you plug why don't you plug yourself, and if there's any shout outs you want to give to your sponsors who may hear this, or
Yeah, I mean, obviously Edge. I'm very thankful. If you guys don't know what Edge is, it's probably the biggest player in the baseball world as far as the dirt. So we do pretty much every professional team's infield, the dirt they play on, that's Edge. The clay that's in the mound, the warning track, brick and lava rock and all that stuff. We're pretty much the biggest players in that game. So I want to give them a shout out. But that's part of my job. Is I take out our customers fishing. Like when I'm traveling, I take a lot of our customers out fishing from MLB, MILB teams, big Division I colleges and stuff. I've got to do that from everywhere, from Maine to South Florida to San Diego. So
that's amazing.
pretty sweet.
That is a way to make it in the fish industry without having to compete. So for everyone listening out there, I mean, find a company to work for. Just take their clients out.
there you go.
Have you
Yeah.
changed? Have you changed any of their minds and they want to switch over to professional angling?
No, but surprisingly, there are a lot of guys that are very, big fans that
Yeah.
keep up with the Bassman that, come to the classic, and I get to hang out with them for a while. One of my buddies, Clay, he works with the Oakland Athletics. He flew the whole way to Greenville. It had nothing to do with me, and he just was coming to volunteer. He wanted to work at the classic and go to the classic and be there, But we spent a few days and went out and smashed some spotted bass on Kiwi and
Heck yeah.
had a blast. There's guys, especially in the Southeast, like you guys. I mean, it's a very popular sport, in the Southeast.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I know. I took you out. You were down taking some clients out in the area, and we went
Yeah.
out and ran around Jordan a little bit, and You elected
what I
to go.
said.
You
No,
elected
I'm
to go
not
to
coming
another
here.
body of water, which I don't blame you for wanting to take clients to another
Yeah,
body
I'm
of
like,
water.
these guys haven't made a cast in about 10 years. Yeah, I'm not taking them to Jordan Lake.
No.
It was when was that? Late March, early April. They were
Yeah,
so you
yeah,
had to
yeah.
be able to pitch bushes like.
Yeah, I was
When
like,
I
there's
told-
no way they're going to do this.
And he had another buddy he was talking to that was like, "Yeah, you just got to get the black and blue jig in the middle of the bush and they'll eat it." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I need to throw
Well,
a wacky
first, I don't
rig."
think they can use a bait caster, so
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to work. We need a wacky worm. Like,
Yeah. So where can our folks find you on social?
so like all of my tags are destined to fish, except on Facebook. I think it's just Destin Demarion Fishing, but destined to fish on Twitter and Instagram, and I think YouTube is the same too.
What about for so Destin runs a guide service. He does
Oh,
guide Presque Bay, Lake Erie. They're at Erie, PA.
Yep.
So if anybody's up that way, where can they find you? And I know you book up quick, so
Yeah, especially now with the EQ, I won't have much time, but it's destindemarion.com, and then I have the guide services on another tab on there. But you can see I've got a bunch of photos and I got some blogs up there about seasonal, so you can kind of pick what fishing you want to do.
yeah.
Walleye.
Yeah.
Not I do get walleye calls. I'm like, I'm not your guy.
Yeah,
Here,
I'm
let me
not your
give you somebody
guy.
else's
No,
number.
let me give you another number here. There's plenty of
Yeah.
walleye guides out that'll go drag a worm harness around for you.
Or lead
Right.
weights. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you guys have dove into that one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with our very first episode, we didn't give it a whole lot of time.
It was
Nah.
like 2 minutes.
I don't think they deserve any more
2022
anymore.
recap, and then we moved
I agree
on.
with that.
It was like COVID, and then we were over.
So yeah, Destin, man, we really appreciate you coming on. I think there was a
Absolutely.
lot of really good
Yeah,
insight.
thank you guys so much.
Everybody, Destin Demarion, obviously one of the top anglers in the country. You don't make it where he's made it by not being. It's not an accident he got where he was. It's not an accident that he has 2 top 10s in 2 years on the elites. That there's guys that have fished 2 years and never accomplished that. So, yeah, man, appreciate it. And maybe we'll get you back on as the EQs go on, and just to kind of get some insight on how that's going, and for folks that might be thinking about fishing it next year.
Yeah, always happy to. I've
be
enjoyed
awesome.
it, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it
Destin,
so
have a
much.
Great day.
Appreciate you,
You
man.
too.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh god, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.